So hello and a very warm welcome to all of you to this edition of What Works, What Doesn't, and Why Insights from Evaluation. And as you would have gathered, today's discussion will be around IED's recent evaluation of ADB's procurement systems. Now, as you can see, we've called today's event Money for Something, obviously alluding to Dire Straits' Money for Nothing. So there's a bit of a disagreement among the team members because some wanted to call it, that fool knows the price of everything and value of nothing. So there was a bit of a scuffle between Oscar Wilde and Dire Straits. Dire Straits won because we thought that'll get in more crowds. And we are right, we've got lots of you here in the room with us, and we've got about 100 of our other colleagues who are joining us online. But on a more serious note, both the song and the quote, at the heart of it is value for money. And that is going to be at the heart of today's discussion as well, and how ADB, through its procurement systems, can ensure value for money. I will now invite Eungji Kim, team leader of the evaluation, to come and make a brief presentation, and then we'll carry on with the event. Eungji.
Thank you, Saleha. Good afternoon. My name is Eungji Kim, the lead for this evaluation, and I would like to start by recognizing my team and my co-lead, Philip Chan. This corporate evaluation of ADB's procurement system focused on the initial implementation of the new Procurement Policy Framework. As shown in the outline, the presentation will cover the following topics. There were 4 key messages in this evaluation. First, ADB's implementation of the Procurement Policy Framework, or PPF, represents a promising start, but significant challenges still remain in attaining the long-term reform objectives. Next, the initial reform results achieved were significant, but likely due to ADB's initial inputs, such as policy and process changes. Sustained commitment to ensure permanent shifts in mindsets and behaviors are still needed. Third, though numerous TAs and workshops helped develop procurement capacity, ADB lacks a strategic approach to procurement capacity development for training its own staff and to support the DMCs. Lastly, the PPF reforms require long-term investment from ADB to improve its procurement data management systems, while also fostering a workplace culture of collaboration and innovation. These are some of the key reform goals of ADB's procurement policy framework. It aimed to harmonize ADB's procurement system with other MDBs, and to do so by modernizing and consolidating its practices and policies into a more unified one. The new framework introduced 2 new core principles, quality and value for money, while fostering the use of more fit-for-purpose procurement for its client countries. PPF also focused on achieving better governance through improved accountability, integrity, avoidance of conflict of interest, and response to procurement-related complaints. As a result, ADB has achieved the following under the PPF. First was the modernization of its operational procedures, and by late 2021, it had developed or updated 26 guidance notes on procurement. Next was the Strategic Procurement Planning, or SPP, which was adopted to help ADB and DMCs better identify relative risks and importance of various procurement packages. Third was the Procurement Capacity Development Support, which was vital for effective implementation of the reforms. Since 2017, over 300 ADB staff were newly accredited or renewed their past accreditations, while more than 7,300 DMC officials received procurement training. Next was the outposting of procurement specialists to resident missions and regional departments, meant to minimize the communication gap and distance between ADB and its clients. ADB has also started modernizing its procurement data management systems. Since 2017, it launched 3 IT systems, one of which, the integrated disbursement system, was long overdue, as it replaced a 40-year-old mainframe-based system. The last was on improving procurement efficiency. Now, the evaluation found that while ADB succeeded in reducing its portion of procurement processing time quite consistently each year since 2017, DMCs could not. Now, these are the challenges encountered in carrying out the procurement reforms. First, key concepts such as value for money are not clearly communicated nor incorporated into ADB's corporate results framework. Next, the procurement risk was assessed based on contract size, as ADB used a size-based threshold that did not account for the fact that the most critical contract in a procurement package is not always among the largest. Third challenge is the adoption of SPP, or the strategic procurement planning, among the client countries, which depended on their existing procurement capacity. So many inexperienced DMCs resorted to using planning reports written by external consultants, resulting in minimal transfer of procurement capacity. Next, many DMCs could not adopt or take full advantage of the PPF due to the high bar of entry, more so if their own regulations were risk averse. The fifth was the lack of an internal capacity development strategy, which resulted in insufficient capacity development, incentivization, and integration of ADB staff for procurement. Another challenge was the insufficient planning and coordination for DMC capacity development support, as such interventions were usually included as one-off regional workshops or as a part of TA support. Finally, many of ADB's data-related systems and processes remain heavily dependent on time-intensive manual input, resulting in errors and inefficiencies. An overall data management strategy is needed to improve procurement data transparency and governance. Finally, these are the recommendations from the evaluation. First, clearly message and better communicate key procurement principles and objectives. Second, prioritize and manage procurement contracts not only by size, but also by how critical they are to project success. Third, strengthen the transparency and governance of procurement by further improving procurement data system design, integration, and management. Fourth, commit strategic long-term investments to continue building on current initiatives to develop procurement capacity of both ADB and the DMCs. Finally, promote interdepartmental collaboration to ensure that SPP is an integrated and holistic practice that considers quality and value for money, including wider social and economic objectives and sustainable procurement. Thank you for your attention. And if you'd like to read more, the evaluation and management's response are both available on ADB's homepage. Thank you.
Thank you, Eungji, and he'll be available here to answer any questions that you might have in the designated question and answer session. And before we move ahead, it's our endeavor to always include the voices of the resident missions as well in the events that we do at the headquarters. So let's quickly take a look at a video where we hear the resident missions react to the procurement evaluation.
I support majority of recommendations, yet one of them, recommendation number 4, is very relevant and important in the context of Uzbekistan. It is very important to sustain a high level of skills and ownership among EAs and government to secure successful operations and project implementation. In this context, we should continue our conventional capacity development and training support, procurement clinics, and also provide advisory support to the government to further strengthen its public procurement systems and also build its own capacity development and advanced training system to achieve high level of skills among government agencies and executing agencies.
ADB has been modernizing its procurement practices under the 2017 Procurement Policy Framework to achieve value for money for more than half a decade. Greater emphasis was put on the use of country procurement systems more and more, as well as initiatives such as introduction of use of strategic procurement planning early on in the project lifecycle. Of course, changing 50 years of procurement practices is not an overnight endeavor. Rather, it's a long-term one which will continue to require strengthening country procurement practices as well as evolution of ADB's own business processes to maximize the development effectiveness, among others through faster and better procurement processes.
The transition from rule-based procurement to principle-based procurement needs, in my opinion, to be also properly articulated with the country's procurement system. On the government side, there are a number of constraints affecting procurement efficiency, decision-making, and timing. We need to understand those constraints and propose solutions and systems to improve transparency and help decision-making in an accountable manner. Planning long-term resources to improve procurement efficiency needs also to be considered in a comprehensive manner to include not only procurement, but preparation, risk analysis, and strategic procurement planning, and also capacity building on conditions of contract and contract management. Finally, interdepartmental collaboration is key to capitalize on experience learned to implement strategic procurement planning that includes quality, value for money, social, environmental, and economic objectives, as well as sustainable procurement.
Procurement plays a large part in the development effectiveness, and the quality of public procurement practices is a major determinant of effective public spending. This is particularly important in the Pacific, amongst the small island development states with limited budgets and high levels of debt distress. Prior to 2017, ADB's procurement processes largely followed a rules-based system with an emphasis on compliance and the substantially responsive lowest bidder, which placed an emphasis on cost. Since 2017, ADB adopted a more principles-based approach in its Procurement Policy Framework, which introduced quality and value for money as two new core procurement principles. This has provided ADB with much greater flexibility in its procurement processes.
So right, with that video and with G's presentation, I think the context is set for today's discussion. And I'd like to invite the panelists. We've got an esteemed list of panelists with us today and some of the best voices in the bank to speak on the topic. I'd like to invite them on the stage. Karen Murray, all of you are familiar with her, AED. Jeff Taylor, Deputy Director General, Procurement Portfolio and Financial Management Department. And Joonho Hwang, Director, Energy Division, Central and West Asia Department. And always to moderate the session, we have DG IED Manny Jimenez. Over to you, Manny, now.
Thanks very much, Saleha and G and other colleagues for a very nice introduction to this topic. And thank you very much to my colleagues here on the panel. And the idea behind, as usual, with this panel is that we have a pretty informal conversation on some of the issues that have been laid out. And then we'll do a few rounds of this. And then please keep in mind any questions that you might have. And also, I think that our colleagues are monitoring any questions that might come up from online. And we'll also try to tackle those if we can. So let me start. Jeff, I wonder if I could start with you. And from PPFD, you have the overarching view about this whole system of procurement. And by the way, I just want to thank you and your department again for a very good interaction with our team in the development of this report. It was a very constructive and informative interaction. But the report talks about not just perhaps something ADB is good at, is changing rules and guidelines and everything, but it talks about the need when we're going from a rules-based to a principles-based approach, talking about changing first mindsets and skills of staff, and also which might be more difficult. I was just wondering, from your point of view in PPFD, what do you see are the priorities in making this transition?
Thank you. Well, Manny, firstly, thank you for saying that about our cooperation, collaboration, and that goes both ways. I actually perversely enjoyed the process. 10 years ago, I might not have done so. But mistakes are our friends, and criticisms, when framed in the right way, help us develop. And that's exactly what we have. We had a friend offering criticism that was constructive. And that's why we had no problems with agreeing with all 5 recommendations, and looking forward to agreeing the action plan on it. The recommendations and the evaluation provide a number of very strong and valid suggestions. And obviously we want to work towards them all. But I think the priorities for me, where we should really focus our efforts on, really in 3 areas. The first, as Alain, I think, mentioned in his presentation as well, is to look at the overall project objectives, look at the overall development impact. How do we bring that into the procurement transaction? How do we secure best value or value for money, however described, or the optimal, Pareto optimal, through the procurement process? And we're still having problems with that, looking at our standard bidding documents and evaluation criteria. But why can't we use merit point evaluation, weighted criteria more frequently, or shortlisting for civil works contractors instead of everyone's qualified? So there is more we can do there. There are good examples of where we have done it. They're not broad enough yet. So we need to broaden the application of the new tools, such as weighted criteria, such as shortlisting in construction, and also be a bit braver and take a few more risks when we're considering what's going to be included as evaluation criteria. For example, there is a gender action plan for every project. Why not reflect some of that in the procurement where appropriate? It's not a separate silo. We should be looking at both. Another area, and the new operating model will help us in this, is systemic capacity development. What's been lacking within procurement is a systemic country-level view of capacity development within that context. We've been okay, well, less than okay, pretty average, on project-based interventions, hiring consultants just to help with implementation. That's not sustainable. That's not systemic. We need to continue supporting projects, but also to look at it in a country context and a systemic way. And one of the things we plan to do through this is to introduce a capacity development planning cycle per country in procurement. And that's not only about training. That needs to be about institutional reform, support for e-procurement, regulatory reform, and capacity development, not just that. And finally, the other area that I think is of very significant potential is e-procurement. We have some of our DMCs that are very advanced in e-procurement, some that have not even started their journey. That's such a powerful tool for efficiency, governance, and value for money. We should be having a louder voice and supporting and helping our borrowers adopt those systems. We have some very good examples of mature, best-in-class e-procurement systems, for example, in South Asia and India. And we have other countries where you have an online advertisement and that's it. We need to help our clients really up the game in that. There's much more I could comment on, but bearing in mind it's 3 minutes each, I'll conclude here. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. Really helpful. And I think we'll get back to some of those questions, especially on the e-procurement side. I think some of the technical issues are going to be important in light of what the report found and the challenges we in ADB have on our own data systems. Joonho, I turn to you. You're someone who doesn't, from operations, of course, is not overseeing procurement specialists, but of course, you have operational staff who have to live with the results of the procurement and also make sure that we deliver value to our clients. From your point of view, what are the priorities that would help you most and your teams most in going forward in your own development efforts through procurement?
Thank you very much. I think I'm speaking on behalf of the operation department, and procurement is definitely a topic that makes a lot of us emotional and passionate. All the challenges that we go through, and the frustration, and the feeling of accomplishment when we reach the contract award signing, and then go how these contracts are built into reality. So I think it's been a good process going through the procurement reform, and also I think it's very important that IED has gone through the review of the current process and provide a good recommendation to present here. From operation point of view, I think with all the good recommendations presented, I have to pick the most difficult one. And I will start with the importance of the strategic procurement planning. It's more on the forward-looking situation. You know, ADB, there has been a lot of changes that ADB has gone through, and the ADB has also made a new commitment that we will be more like the climate-based bank. And the demand from the client is becoming more complex and complicated. And our solution tend to be also becoming more complicated with a multi-sector approach and etc. So I think it is very important that our procurement, when we start working with the inception and the design, we do have a clear understanding where the country situations sits and what is their path for the development. Sometimes our project tend to become a transformational. That, you know, we place a great seed to a certain industry or certain sector. That we don't have to see our project as a one and off opportunity. It could be an opportunity that can change the country industry for longer term. So I think that's where the value for money comes in very nicely. Again, as recommended, it is very important that we work on a collaborative way, looking at different perspective of the situation and come up with a different risk assessment and the risk mitigations. Also related, good recommendation is that we should not look at the risk, assess the risk based on the contract size only. I can't, I have seen this situation in many times as a part of the, not only as an energy operation, but I also have an opportunity to work in a country where dealing with a multiple sector. Energy sector operation, of course, is dealing with a different entity, mostly the state-owned enterprises, which are working more on the corporate form, which have a very strong function available in-house. Whereas some other sectors like health or education sector, we may deal with a ministry who have a very dedicated or expertise, and procurement may not be the one. So we have to be really careful in understanding our target audience. The risk that we see in the energy sector will be very different from the risk that will be discussed in the different sector. So all these elements, I better suggest that we look at this in a more open way and put those points we discussed, captured in the strategic procurement plan, and will help us design better projects.
Thanks a lot, Joonho. I really appreciate the emotional side that you mentioned, which I think is great on procurement, but also, of course, totally agree that size is not always everything. Karen, you're at the board and you have a strategic overview of the whole institution. And also, very importantly, especially for you, you have the perspective of both DMC and non-DMC members in your own chair. When we were doing our rounds on the pre-deck meetings, we heard a lot of different perspectives, a lot of complaints about still the challenges and procurement here in the ADB. What do you think are the priorities, and is ADB on the right track in addressing some of those concerns?
Thanks very much, Manny, and a really big thank you for inviting me to be the board member that sat on this panel for the procurement evaluation. And I say that because I kind of do feel like I have a passion and enthusiasm as well for procurement. And that's partly because this has been a really, really important issue for New Zealand for a long time, and it really predates me, so at least a decade now. And I think that we were actually really influential in driving the adoption of the new procurement policy back in 2017. And a lot of that has to do with the impact that procurement was having on outcomes and projects in the Pacific. So I represent a number of Pacific countries as well, and it's been such an important issue to all of them for many years. So I really appreciated that IED also highlighted the importance, not just for our projects, but in terms of procurement's role in driving better development impact in countries. And I think sometimes that's kind of lost a little bit in the weeds of, just trying to get a project done, but really trying to understand, the potential for development effectiveness and development impact, and for everyone to shift their mindset here at ADB about the role that procurement can play. I think will have huge benefit in future. I looked back at some of the notes that I've sent my New Zealand colleagues over the last couple of years, because I have paid a lot of attention to the rollout of the reforms. I guess the headline message I was giving was, the policy itself is fit for purpose, because I think we were so slow in rolling it out that a lot of partners were saying, well, we just don't see any impact. We don't think this is really making a difference. So it was trying to say, look, the policy itself is great. It's fit for purpose. It's about how we're implementing it. And I think that's something that IED highlighted really nicely. We have made a lot of progress, but there's still a lot to do in terms of rolling out the procurement policy and implementing it. And a point that I raised at the DEC meeting is that I think there's some lessons there for us in terms of how we grandfather across major policy changes. Anything with a concept note before the 1st of July 2017 is still under the old procurement policy. And we were really slow to shift that. And I think we should have shifted a whole lot quicker, because 5-6 years later, we're still seeing projects come through that apply the old rules, and sometimes where those old rules are not really fit for purpose. But I think Jeff would note that I have become less and less grumpy with every annual procurement briefing that PPFD does to us, or provides the board with. So this year particularly, I really felt like I was starting to see some of the improvements flow through. So some of the things around like the merit point system and life cycle costing, and being more flexible in terms of working and harmonizing with other partners. So I can see that there has been a lot of progress made over the last couple of years. And the pace has picked up. So, I think we're kind of on the right track. But, there's still a lot to do. Your recommendations in the evaluation were great. And you heard from Jeff already about how they also agree and are picking those up. So I thought maybe 5 areas, and these are kind of interrelated, and colleagues on the panel have already touched on some of them. But what we're hearing from our members, DMCs and non-DMCs, in no particular order, but one that is really relevant to all, and not just in the Pacific, is about the use of country systems. And that's something that every single DMC member would like to see more of. And I think we need to be realistic about how much we are actually going to move towards adopting country systems. But it does link with one of the other recommendations that colleagues have talked about already. And that's moving beyond supporting project level procurement capacity, and actually really focusing on what we can do to build that long-term capacity in countries. I think that's a hugely important area. And even if we don't get to fully adopting country systems, I think we can move quite a long way towards that. The third area is promoting local content. And again, this is really important to big and small countries. But when I look at it in the context of the Pacific, building domestic capacity is really, really important for sustainability as well as the economic benefits that need to flow from procurement. Fourth area, again, kind of linked to that, is about promoting competition. I think one of the legacy issues that I would see, particularly in the Pacific from the procurement approaches under the old policy, relate to the fact that when we were just using the lowest cost bid, we were not building a sustainable competitive market. And I think we're starting to see the effects of that in the Pacific now in terms of the level of competition and bids. And, you know, it's a classic static versus dynamic efficiency problem. And I think we're seeing the impact of that now in terms of pricing and competition. And then the last one, which every single member, but particularly our DMCs, are feeling very strongly on, is business process reform. And that's also relevant for procurement. So the speed, the efficiency, and just modernizing those processes is really important. Just before we came up to the stage, Jeff and I were having a quick side chat about the procurement times. And my point to him was, we might be we're reducing our procurement times and DMCs are not, but actually there's a lot of how we do our piece that impacts on the amount of time it takes them. So sometimes I think we're not taking into account what's fit for purpose and good enough, and actually, just being maybe a bit pedantic and putting more questions back on them that really add value. So, there's definitely work to do, and a lot of that is just down to our mindset, which others have touched on, but I think is probably the biggest challenge of all for the change we're trying to make. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Karen. Really, really important perspectives from our ultimate clients, which are the DMCs and their voices. Jeff, you heard Karen talk a lot about the need to, if we're going to promote country systems and so on, about building local capacity. And I know, Karen, you have ideas on this as well, but we also heard from the field and our colleague from Uzbekistan about how to do that. But building capacity is probably one of the more difficult challenges here in this institution, certainly in my experience across MDBs. Do you have any examples, Jeff, of where we have been able to do that in the procurement space, and what sort of practices might be more effective?
Okay, well, one of the things we need to do is think about this systemically and longer-term partnerships. Where we have been ineffective, I think, is, at least from a developmental perspective, is when we turn up, bit of TA for transaction advisory, and then walk away. But one of the enduring relationships we have had is with the Government Procurement Policy Board and PhilJet in the Philippines. And I know this because I was here in 1998, 99, when I was first looking at it. And we're still working with them sporadically on the development of e-procurement and reviewing it. But it works well when you don't take a time-barred or limited intervention. Procurement reform, capacity building, institutional strengthening is not a one-year project. It's not a 3-year project. It's a systemic long-term engagement. And also what you need to make sure of is that it is sustainable. If it's reliant on grant or TA financing, when that financing goes away, the benefit goes away. So you need to think about co-ownership. You need to think about how the model will be sustained. And we don't do that enough. We go in with a single intervention, Nepal's e-procurement system. We put the seed money in there, built the basic system, and that was it. The TA was finished and we're done. And it can't be like that. It doesn't work. It needs to be, and it takes decades. I'm talking about the Procurement Policy Board because I know that things are relatively similar over the last 24 years because it was 24 years ago I first looked at it, and it's still the same set of issues coming up. And you've got to take a view in that time frame, and it can't be only dependent on TA. There's got to be cultural change as well. I'm quite encouraged by what we're doing in terms of capacity building in a program called Build Proc. We're partnering with the International Labour Organization Training Center to actually train EA staff in procurement. A little bit like PASS within ADB, for those of you familiar with the ADB internal training program. but far broader on procurement and project implementation. And we would actually like that to evolve into an entry level to a master's program. And we're discussing with a couple of universities. So, you know, it's a postgraduate diploma kind of level at the third level. But we need to hit this at volume. It can't just be 30 people. So we're looking at about 200 to 250 a year. And, you know, that's reliant on TA financing, but it needs to be long term. You know, we need to keep topping up that TA, and we don't finish the program when the TA money comes out. So the biggest message I would have on procurement engagement and building capacity is think long term, not even medium term. It's got to be thought of as a long-term initiative at a country level and within ADB, not just as a project intervention.
Thanks, Jeff. And I see nodding from my other panelists, colleagues. And so I'd like to actually ask them, what did you mean by those nods? So Karen, especially to you, I know that you've been thinking about this, especially in the context of the small islands, developing economies. And will that work?
Thanks, Manny. What I was probably mostly nodding to is the idea that it needs to be long-term and it can't just be based around a single project. A couple of points may be relevant to the SIDS context in particular. Just training individuals doesn't work. Very small countries, very, very small populations, training people, they're probably going to leave. You know, working with individuals just isn't sustainable. So we need to think about developing capacity, but also supplementing capacity, and trying to find ways to do that work effectively. You know, you don't lose ownership, you're still building capability in the country, but you're thinking about it in a way that it's supplementing compared to just having it all within government, building within government agencies. So I think we do need to look at slightly different models when we're looking in the SIDS context. But the really important thing is it's long-term and it's beyond ADB's own projects. Something that is maybe a little bit unique in the Pacific is, you know, the size, particularly for some countries that are quite aid dependent. A lot, if not all, of the big infrastructure projects are financed by development partners, and development partners need to work better together. So, you know, everyone's trying to get their own project done. But if you start in terms of having capacity for procurement and it's just based around everyone's individual project and they're not being connected up, then you lose people and then it's hard to get them back as well. So development partners really need to try harder.
I guess that speaks to Jeff's point about what it means to have a system that's sustainable if you're going to build capacity. Joonho, yeah, I'd like to hear your views as well, but if you could also reflect on whether or not you think that capacity among our own, not just among DMCs, but among our ADB staff and how that can be built up in this area.
Thank you. So adding to those capacity building for the year to start with, I absolutely agree that we should see it as a long-term partnership. And we often see that once our PMU staffs are educated and, you know, and they have moved to the different career paths, but we shouldn't see that as an old lost effort. This is is a continuation of the capacity building of the next generation, and we should continue to do that. One good example that I actually have seen is in Cambodia. I think the ADB has collaborated with the government to prepare the procurement manual, and government has decided to accept it as a curriculum to train their government officials. So they have coordinated with the local education facility and use it as a platform to educate the upcoming government officials. I do hope that the program is being implemented as planned, but I think this can be done in a country. I think this is already a set of good examples that can be explored in other countries. Internally speaking, I think we do have already a very good program called the PASS accreditations, and the impact has been phenomenal. I have seen my own staff that has gone through this internal process, and I can see them expanding their knowledge over the course of the years. And 1 or 2 years, they will be the frontliner in reviewing the bidding document, interacting with our PMU staff at a different level. So not only, it provides us a wide array of, the relations that we can build at the high level, at the, at different level of ADB staff, and also different level with the executing agency and implementing agency. I do hope that we continue this path and then, continue to emphasize as an important, capacity building for our own staff.
Thanks. And I note that you also want to extend the long-term perspective, not just externally, but also internally, that it may actually take some time to build up our own capacity here in the ADB, but it's beginning to bear fruit. Jeff, there's this kind of narrative that Joonho has been talking about from CWRD. Do you see that resonating throughout the ADB? And what are some of the challenges for our own internal capacity building within the institution?
Yeah, one of my challenges has been trying to get Joonho to join PPFD. He's one of the best procurement specialists out there, even if it's not in his job title. He was an excellent PAU head, and we worked very closely together. Over the years since I joined ADB, I've seen procurement change from a function that appeared to take joy in refusing things and saying no, to something that is seeking to add value. And I think critical to this, number one was pass, even though I didn't agree with the design, so they took me off it. But number one is pass. But number two is placing procurement specialists within project teams and resident missions. So we learn from operations and we feed back into operations, and that has to continue and will continue under the NOM. In fact, it will increase. There'll be nobody left on the 7th floor, which is as it should be. But there has been increasing recognition about the missed potential for procurement to add value. And there's been increased willingness from the procurement side to explore that and actually take what we would have considered bad procurement decisions or risks 10 years ago to incorporate best practice and better outcomes or mechanisms that will contribute to better outcomes in procurement. 15, 20 years ago, procurement were the police and rightly disliked for saying no to everything. Now, because of some of our performance, it's not as good as it should be everywhere. We're being seen as an enabler and a function that adds value, and that needs to continue, and it needs to increase. I'm very heartened to hear Joonho's views and support, and thank you, Joonho. The job's open. I do see a couple of former procurement specialists, and I never have any problem with Alain joined us in PPFD, Catherine as well, procurement specialists going out into the broader ADB, because that shows me we have value. And we are broader based than just the function. We can contribute more broadly, and I think we can. So it's changed hugely since I first joined ADB in 2007. And thanks for mentioning my manual. I think it was mine.
Great. Just to warn people, I will be asking you if you have any questions or comments to our panelists, and also if there's anyone online. But before I turn to Karen for her views on this, but please be prepared for your own question.
Thanks, Manny. I did just want to offer a couple of points on that, because I really think that the shift in the new operating models, having procurement specialists as part of the team right from the outset is really critical. I've been thinking for a while, like, how do we actually get this mindset shift that's needed? And it's clear that it needs to be in project offices, but I just feel like that's almost too difficult. And the only way we're really going to see it is by having procurement specialists actually in there as part of the team. One thing, and I guess this is a question for anyone in the audience as well, is like, what will it take to get the mindset shift here in ADB away from being rules-based towards principles-based? And I was saying to you earlier, I mean, I've been here nearly 4 years, and the longer I'm here, the less optimistic I am in some ways. But we're saying the right things about it, and much more so than we were a couple of years ago. But it just seems to be so difficult. So if anyone would like to send me their thoughts on what it would actually take to make that shift, I'd love to hear it. Because we have a much more principles-based approach in New Zealand, much less on this rules-based approach. And there's an expectation that you exercise judgment, and you are paid to exercise judgment, and you have to take on some risk in doing that. So I'm kind of thinking that some of it is when things don't go well, how people respond to that must be part of the problem. But I'd love to know if we've done any staff surveys, perhaps, on this. And it's not just procurement; it's everything. So what's it going to take to change the culture? That's a question for all of you. Thank you.
And I gather that might go beyond procurement.
It goes beyond procurement. I had a conversation about this in a completely unrelated area today. So it's in everything. Thanks.
Okay, so that's a question that we invite anyone to opine on. But also, if you have any other questions, please, now's the opportunity in our last 8 minutes or so. So anyone here?
Right, Manny. So despite poor audio and video quality, there are about 100 ADB staff who are online. So let's give them the chance to ask the question first. I'll request Eungji to kind of convey the questions to
Jiang Bo-ning has asked, I think, to Jeff, what is ADB's plan for some DMCs like Bangladesh to move toward full e-procurement? I'm guessing he's from the Bangladesh resident mission.
Okay, well, the fact that Bangladesh has put in $128 million into their e-procurement system encourages me somewhat, and they're serious about reforming it. We are already supporting it, I believe, to a certain threshold. I think we need to go further and reciprocate, ADB's commitment with their investment and go higher. I'm not sure where we actually are. I know we approve use of Bangladesh's e-procurement system below a certain threshold. I would like to know and have to check if we've removed that. Maybe Jiang Bao can tell me, and happy to have a conversation offline. And Bangladesh is presenting, a good story. India and the National Informatics Center has done brilliant work in certain states on e-procurement, more advanced than anything ADB has in place or World Bank. Other countries, unfortunately, a bit of a vacuum. And Bangladesh has seen the opportunity, and ADB has been supporting it, and I would like to see more of our projects go through it. The ultimate nirvana or position of trust is to actually stop mandating ADB systems, but there are issues or oversight, and actually go to full borrower-led APAs, alternative procurement arrangements. But we do have some issues around eligibility and OAI that need to be addressed within that. But that is the next step after Bangladesh's rollout of e-procurement system, is to actually rely on that system in its entirety. Not there yet, but it is the next evolutionary step in the process.
Any other remarks or responses from here in Manila or anywhere else? While you think about that, maybe Joonho, I could ask you if you could take a stab at Karen's question on changing mindsets from being rules-based to being more of a responsible, prudent risk taker. In the new operating model, there's this narrative that says that we're going to be giving more responsibility to staff, especially in resident missions. From your experience, do you think that that's really going to take hold very quickly, or will that be a longer-term perspective? And what would need to change for staff to be more comfortable with taking risks that are prudent risks, but risks nonetheless?
Okay, tough question, but I think the answer is very clear. I mean, this is the direction that we are heading, and I think we shouldn't think twice. It's just a matter of how we are preparing ourselves to build the capacity of our staff in the resident mission, and I think this is what we should do. Focus on in the next few years to find the best way to expedite such transformations. So let me stop there.
Okay, all right, fine, thank you. It's a tough question, Karen. It remains to be answered in the next few weeks.
Okay. Our online colleague also commented on AED Karen's question, what will it take to shift mindsets, and refer to our evaluations, recommendation, or indication that the KPIs and the corporate results framework and staff performance metrics will need to be better aligned with a principle-based approach to perhaps incentivize such a shift. And also Ed, I don't know where he's from, but he has fully agreed with Jeff about and the PPFD on the long-term and continuous capacity building of EAs and ADB staff, and that we need to continue to enhance capacity and performance of them, the EAs and the staff in procurement and contract management and project implementation, safeguards, financial management, etc. Thank you.
Thanks. Jeff, I wanted to get back to the point that you brought up on the use of technology, so using e-procurement in DMCs, but the report also pointed out that we ourselves have challenges within ADB on data systems, which would be the bedrock for any technological fixes. What's the progress on our data systems here in ADB?
Yeah, we're heading in the right direction. We're never going as quickly as I wanted to. One of the challenges we have in procurement is it's not actually ADB's procurement, it's third-party procurement. So capturing the data has always required manual re-input and capture. Conceptually, I'm very clear on the design that I think is appropriate and that we need. And there is financing in place, and it is being included under the SovOps project. We are heading in the right direction. I'm having a meeting with the chair of the ITDC, I'm chair of the IT. No, I'm chair of one of them. I'm chair of something anyway. The data committee. But with the SovOps PMU to see what can be accelerated for earlier adoption. And to be honest, I do think procurement is low-hanging fruit because it has defined transactional limits. You know, the start point, which is the financing plan, you know, the end point, which is disbursement. And then the workflow in between that is fairly well known. You know, it's bidding, evaluation, award. Rumor has it sometimes the award is decided before bidding, but part of our job is to ensure that doesn't happen. So I would like to see this moving forward quite quickly, and I don't think it's a very complex process. So I hope when we have the challenge is having the IT infrastructure and platforms available to facilitate this. And those are coming in place now. So it's a short to medium run opportunity. And I think things are going to improve significantly in the next 12 to 18 months.
Thanks. Karen, are you happy with that? Because I know the data is, again, an issue that goes beyond procurement, but it's an issue that comes up a lot at the board discussions.
It does come up a lot. Jeff and I were both on the inaugural digital leadership course that was rolled out this year, which I think was a fantastic initiative. And I've heard Jeff talk about some of his plans around the procurement side. So I have a lot of confidence in how Jeff is thinking about it. And hopefully the SovOps system will start to move a little bit more quickly now, because I think for procurement, that data is really, really critical. Some positive improvements over the last couple of years, the ProcDash website that's out there, we're starting to put more data out there, but in terms of doing market analysis and like I said, that role I see for us in terms of fostering competition in the market, we really need to be able to do analysis that we currently can't do with how we're collecting data on procurement.
Great, thanks. So I think we're running out of time, Saleha. So I'm going to ask each of you 10-second last-minute thoughts on procurement. Any messages you want to leave with our group? So start with Jeff, and then I'll turn to Joonho, and then to Karen.
Okay, well, my takeaway is I'm delighted this is getting the attention with 100 people online and this many people here when we get so used to remote attendance. That is getting the attention of Karen on the board and Manny and IED. Procurement's profile has been raised. We're being held to account, and I quite like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Joonho, last thoughts.
Yes, I think we are on the right path with the reform for procurement. And I think let's take it a good reminder that we refocus on and getting the remaining tasks done to improve our system.
Karen.
So as I said earlier, I think procurement has huge potential for creating value, but we won't realize that value if we don't also focus on the other parts of the project life cycle. So just doing the procurement isn't enough. There has to be effective contract management and enforcement, and the project needs to be delivered. And we need to make sure that, you know, we're not having cost overruns and all of these things that can really undermine the value of a great procurement at the outset.
Great. No, thanks. So the message is that it has to be money for something, and that something is development impact. So back to you, Saleha.
Very much to the panelists. Thank you very much to the audience for being here. And really, I mean, we need to thank the people online who braved the poor audio and video quality to stay on with us. But before I go, may I request all of you to please provide us with your feedback about the event. That just helps us do these things better. So that's it for now. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.